In this video, you will learn about habits, why you need them, and how you can make healthier ones by understanding a little of the brain's reward system and the anatomy of habits. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said that the root of beauty was beautiful choices. If your choices are beautiful, so too will you be. It's simple and it's true. We make choices, and in the end, our choices make us. If we want a beautiful life, there's no escaping it. We have to make beautiful choices. And habits were once a choice. These books have been important in my learning about habits, and I recommend them for anyone watching the video. The Charles Duhigg book, The Power of Habits, is a good starting point, and James Clear's Atomic Habits is helpful for learning about the system that creates good habits and how to change bad ones. The two other books, Dopamine Nation and The Craving Mind, are important for understanding the neurochemistry of why habits are so incredibly difficult to change and the role of dopamine in so much of our behavior. To begin, let's look at the difference between a routine and a habit. A routine is a structured behavior to which you attach meaning. Routines are comforting because they bring stability. Habits are learned behavior that have been triggered by cues and for which there is some kind of a reward. The important difference between the two is that habits are experienced as semi-conscious or unconscious impulses towards a behavior. Behind this impulse lies a craving that has been conditioned by previous rewarding experiences. Your routine might be to put on your right shoe before the left, but if one day you do the opposite, it won't make you uncomfortable. But what if your habit is to procrastinate instead of doing what's on your to-do list? Then you are unconsciously alleviating unpleasant emotions about the work with non-productive distractions. Habits are how our brains evolved to help us survive. They are our primal learning system that made sure we remembered important environmental information. In a previous video on this channel, I explained how habits are neural energy savers, and you can check that out over here. Remember that your brain consumes 20% of the calories you eat in a day. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to learn something new, to solve a problem, or to recognize a pattern. So when you do, the brain's reward system, specifically the nucleus accumbens and the limbic system, reinforces your gargantuan effort with new learning and a squirt of that feel-good neurotransmitter dopamine. In this way, habits enable the brain to save energy for other important cognitive functions. For example, the first time a rat runs a maze, his brain is using vast amounts of neural energy to solve the problem of how to find the treat at the end of that maze. But each time after the first run, the rat learns to find the reward faster. When scientists look at the brain of the rat who has learned how to navigate the maze, they see significantly less neural energy being used. In fact, it almost looks like a part of their brain is asleep. That's the beauty of habits. They help the brain save energy, to solve new problems, to respond to new stimuli. What you see here are neurons firing together and creating a pathway. There is a saying among neuroscientists that neurons that fire together wire together. This means that the rat neurons involved in learning to solve this maze fired together repeatedly. This creates a neural pathway, and the more often these connections are used, the stronger and faster they become. Repetition is the brain's signal that this behavior is important, so it will make sure that this new circuit will fire easier and take less energy by covering those axons in a myelin sheath. The bottom line is that the repetition is the message to your brain that this is important, remember it, and make it easier for me to execute. The headquarters for habits is the brain's reward center. This is at the heart of all learning. When we learn something new, our brains reward us with a squirt of that feel-good neurotransmitter called dopamine. This neurotransmitter is so important that without it, we could not learn. We could not make decisions or even know what was important to us. Without dopamine, we would have no desire, no curiosity, no motivation to do anything at all. Without the craving or the desire for the reward, there would be no habit formation. Dopamine feels really good. The more dopamine you get, the more you want to reproduce that experience, that behavior. Its specialty is desire and motivation. We experience dopamine as excitement, as enthusiasm, as curiosity about what makes that thing work, or the desire to test your limits, to learn a new skill. That's all dopamine. Dopamine is important for learning because it creates a laser focus. This means that whatever behavior we're doing, or thoughts or feelings we're having, that experience has been heightened by dopamine, and that makes sure it will move from the short-term memory to the long-term one. The more dopamine appears when this behavior or feeling happens, the more we will remember this. So dopamine, like repetition, is a tag that tells your brain, this is important, remember this thing. Most habits are unconscious in the sense that we engage in them without full awareness, kind of like being on autopilot. Some researchers say that more than 50% of our behavior is habitual, automatic, and unconscious, or at least we're not paying attention to it. This is how the brain saves its precious energy for novel situations, so we can pay full attention to any threats in the environment. Now you know why habits are important for the brain, as well as understanding some of the neurochemistry of how they work. Let's look at the anatomy of habits by understanding habit loops. Habits are triggered by cues, and they're strengthened by rewards. Cues can be anything from certain times of day or places, people, events, memories, and even feelings. Cues are mostly context dependent, meaning that when the environment changes, so can the cues. Have you ever noticed how on vacation your habits have been temporarily suspended only to reappear when you return home? Sometimes it's helpful to change the environment when we want to eliminate bad habits. Rewards are the experiences of pleasure or relief from unpleasant mental and emotional inner states. Rewards are often unconscious, just as habits are unconscious. Before beginning the work of deconstructing bad habits, we need to understand both the cues and the rewards. Even though a habit is automated, and sometimes the cues and rewards can be very difficult to see, you can become aware of them. Begin by observing your behavior in a non-judgmental way. In The Power of Habits, the author Charles Duhigg talks about his cookie habit and how at a certain time every afternoon, there's the cue, he would get up from his desk, go to the cafeteria, and eat his cookie. That was the behavior. But after several unwanted excess pounds, he decided to change his habit by first uncovering the cue. In this case, it was a time-sensitive trigger at 3 in the afternoon. Maybe his blood sugar was low. What he soon realized was that the reward was the pleasure from the social interaction and not the cookie. So the first lesson in habit change is not only understanding the triggers, but also understanding the rewards. In James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, we learn that the key to understanding the reward is to pay attention to the cravings. Remember, that's the dopamine at play, reinforcing that behavior that feels good. In Duhigg's case, it was human contact, friendship, and connection, the most basic of human needs. The dopamine makes sure that the reward is positive, so the behavior is learned and repeated. Some of you will recognize that this is operant conditioning that is increasing the frequency of the behavior with positive reinforcement. Let's apply this to the bad habit of procrastination. You've got a deadline, and instead of getting down to work, you walk the dog, you check your phone, you slide down a TikTok hole, and the list can go on and on. The trigger and the behavior are easy enough to see, but what's the craving behind procrastination, and what's the reward? How does it feel inside when the reminder of that important work that needs to be done sends you off in every direction except the right one? Is it anxiety? Maybe it's insecurity. Are you feeling overwhelmed, not sure if you're up to the task? It's normal to avoid unpleasant feelings with distractions. You're craving a mood change. You want to go from unpleasant to pleasant, from stressed to relaxed. The behavior of procrastination is an attempt to change your emotional state. The relief from this unpleasant emotional state is the reward that in turn reinforces the behavior of procrastination. When we know what we really crave, then we are one step closer to being able to change it. Now that you understand more about the anatomy of habits, let's look at some simple steps for building change, like starting small. James Clear aptly named his book Atomic Habits because just like atoms are an extremely small amount of a thing, they are also a great source of power. So too are the small changes that you can make every day. Setting clear and achievable goals is the first place to start, but it's important to understand that the goals are not the final objective. The journey on the way there is. The hiker, who after many kilometers on the trail arrives at the end, realizes that the journey was more important than the destination. It's important to have goals. They are destinations, signposts on the journey that we are in movement and progressing. Achieving goals is not the final objective. Building a system that will help you achieve your goals, getting there, and then setting new goals is the objective. Focus on the journey or the system that you build to achieve your goals, and you'll be able to accomplish anything. It's easy enough to set goals, but showing up and doing the work, putting in the reps consistently every day, that's the secret sauce to achieving the goals. Changes that transform and habits that stick are only possible if you show up and do the reps, even if it's boring, uncomfortable, or anxiety-provoking. Successful habit change is impossible without embracing the suck, the Navy SEALs motto for achieving excellence. When you're building a new habit, just show up, even if you don't feel like it. Don't wait for the mood or the emotion. Accept the boring and I really don't feel like it. Show up and engage in that repetitive behavior. Remember, that's the signal to your brain to lay down those new learning pathways. Successful habit change depends on the system you build to support your transformation and not so much on the goals that you set. In the next video in this series, you will learn about the positive compounding effect of improving 1% each day and the 2-minute rule for creating baby steps in habit change, and finally, the 4 laws for building systems that support the habit change. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe.